Alright, so I want to start by making some very minor changes, just formatting things a bit differently, the way I personally like it. And at the same time, I'll get more and more familiar with this template. That's how I usually work. So I'll start by removing this coding standards ignore annotation because right now I'd like to see the warnings from PHP Mass Detector and a code sniffer. We can always add suppress and annotations again later on. Secondly, I would like to change this annotation here for the block variable. It's super great it's there, but I like it to be first the type, then the variable. And I also like to have an annotation for the escaper. Yeah, like this. Because using the escape methods on the block instances is no longer best practice according to the Magento coding standard. It's actually deprecated. So how about we do a search and replace? And I want to replace block escape with escape without a typo. Escape. Yeah, okay. So this was just 3 small changes. So not a lot, but doesn't hurt. Next, what I like to do is I like to import all classes because that's how we roll in Hoover. In Hoover, all classes are always imported by default. But if there's a good reason not to import a class, then, no problem. We can also use the fully qualified class name. But to start with, let's import stuff. And also, I would like to declare strict types. All right. Now, what's happening here? Let's give it a second. Here we go. Code sniffer kicks in. All right, so here we have a space we don't want. Here we have the datamage init call with some JSON configuration. We'll get to that later. Here we also have a space we don't want. All right, some kind of overlay stuff for each. Get slides. What's this? Oh, I guess this here. What's here? That's just a long line. No, wait a moment. What's wrong here? I don't get it. Space after keyword expected. Oh well. Oh, it just hadn't updated yet. All right, sorry. So, okay, what about this here? So this is a long line and, all right, this is actually kind of interesting. So here a data prefix is added to the source attribute if there's more than one slide. And the same thing happens here for the title too. Can we somehow make this a bit nicer looking? Not that easily, huh? Well, I guess what we could do is something like this maybe. Not a fan. Oh well, maybe we can think of something nicer later on. What's here? Alright, so this is another nested component responsible for collecting the statistics, the click statistics. Alright, so we'll deal with that later. Let's just ignore this for now. Here we have a long class attribute. Let's leave it. And okay, here's some strings being built up iteratively. Here's a space we don't want. This is another long line, but this one we can easily fix. Same here. Let's just start the attributes on a new line. And here we have a space we don't want. Okay. So, that's not really interesting. Let's start with something interesting, and that is, let's import this here, this get banner init params, right? Let's see which script is being initialized here in Luma and then inline it into this phtml file. So I want to look at the source code of the rendered file here. Here it is. And this is the script name and this is the config. Okay, awrb slider. So this would map to, well, I expect it would be this script here, but the mapping should be configured right here. Yeah, this here, awrb slider, maps to this file right here. Let's have a look. Okay, so this is an AMD module. It depends on jQuery, UIKit slideshow, and Moment.js. We don't have jQuery and we don't have Moment.js. Both are pretty easy to replace with standard vanilla JavaScript though. But UIKit, maybe we can continue to use it. I would like that, at least to start with. Okay, so this is a jQuery UI widget. And we have some options. All right, so before I look at this any closer, I've already made up my mind. So widgets, jQuery UI widget in particular, are very easy to replace usually, or well, maybe not easy, but can pretty straightforwardly be replaced with Alpine.js component. So let's do that. Let's start by copying most of this code over into our file here, transforming it into a Alpine.js component initialization function, and then go over it one by one. So let's start by adding a script tag. And strict mode enabled. Function init awrb slider maybe. And we want to return an object. Now I'll start by taking the widget declaration, so this object here. Just select all of this here, all the way down to here. Right, copy all of this, and that's what we'll return here. Okay, and now we can start going over it. But before we do so, let's call this method as an actual Alpine.js component initialization function. So here, instead of doing datamage init, what we'll do is xdata equals and then init awrb slider. Also, while we're at it, let's take all this here, this block of JSON, and pass it as an argument into this function. And you might remember here in the source code, the syntax for datamage init first specifies the script and then the configuration for the script. Now, here I'm only interested in the configuration, all these values here, because probably they're configured somewhere in the backend, right? So maybe we can just fetch this sub entry record here and serialize that. And this looks super ugly, so maybe we can make this a little nicer. How about slider config? Something like this. Yeah, a little nicer maybe. And now I guess we can remove, oh wait, look at this. So they use single quotes here. The reason these single quotes are used is because when things are JSON encoded, it returns string values in the JSON using double quotes. And if we have a HTML attribute with double quotes, then the quotes within the JSON terminate the attribute value prematurely. So we have to use single quotes here so the string doesn't get terminated too earlier. All right, so now we can get rid of this. All right, that actually doesn't look too bad. What's wrong here? Duplicated code fragment. Oh, that's, I don't know why, whatever. Not important right now why PHP Storm thinks this is duplicated. Okay, now back here. So now we receive the config up here. So in jQuery widgets, the config that's passed to the constructor, this object, is automatically merged together with the default options value. So we will have to do that manually, and we could do that using object destructuring. But I think that's not yet fully supported for all the browsers Hoover supports. So instead, what we do to merge two objects is we call object assign. So here we have the default config, and then we merge in the config that's passed in as an argument, like so. So any existing keys that also exist in the default would be overridden, and any new keys in config that aren't part of this default object, they will just be merged in. And that's now our Alpine.js component options property. Okay. Next up, we have a initialization method. So _create is the constructor function for jQuery UI widgets. With Alpine.js, it's kind of convention to call this init. So let's go ahead and rename this to init. And with Alpine.js version 3, if there is an init method on the component, it will be called automatically. But with Alpine.js version 2, we have to ensure it gets called. And we do that by adding a xinit attribute, like so. All right. And also, with Hoover, we don't use this syntax, we use this method syntax. So we have an object with methods that are declared like this. I don't think there's a functional difference to it, but this is just, more modern, nicer. It's fully supported by all supported browsers, so let's use the syntax consistently. All right, well, so what happens inside of this constructor function? It's quite long. Okay, it doesn't quite fit onto the screen here. So first of all, this is aliased to self. This is something I seriously dislike. It's really a hack. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to replace this aliasing with proper scope handling. Sometimes self is used, sometimes that is used, sometimes $this is used. All of this is, I think it's an anti-pattern. So where is self used? So first it's used here in this callback function to an event observer from the looks of it. And if we want to do this properly in a JavaScript 1.0 compatible manner, what we would do is we would, after the function called bind, this. Right? So now this value of this inside of this function is the same value that we are binding here. So no use for self anymore. But nowadays there's an even better way we can do this. So instead of using bind, we'll just use an arrow function, like so. And this doesn't change the object context. So again, we have no need to use self anymore. So where else is self used? Here, same thing. You know what? This is just a one-liner. So we might as well just replace all of this with an arrow function, a single line arrow function. This, yeah. Is self used somewhere else? No, that's all. All right, so self is gone. Next, var is kind of old school and deprecated. Today we should use either let or we should use const. The difference is if a variable is reassigned, so variable name equals, that's an assignment. So if that happens more than once, we have to use let. So here we declare the sideshow and here we use an assignment operator, that's why you have to use let. In all other cases, if we don't want to reassign a variable, we can use const. So here this would be invalid because here something's being assigned. Now let's just remove it up here and add the const keyword there. And now we can be sure, okay, this isn't being reassigned. It just adds another little bit of security, I guess. Right, so what have we got here? This is a double equal sign comparison operator, which may cause type conversion. And it's always a good idea to use type safe comparisons, even if that means using some kind of typecasting manually to ensure something is compared using the same type. All right, and I'm just noticing there's 2 more usages of self in this comment. We'll just use this directly here because there isn't even a scope switch there, so no problem. All right, so what's happening here? UIKit will have to figure out where to get this instance, I guess. So on some kind of event observer is being called. Let's skip this for now until we know how to get this UIKit instance. Same here. So here this element is being passed in as an argument, and this element in jQuery UI widgets always refers to the instance, the DOM element on which the jQuery UI widget is instantiated. This is kind of what $this EL is in Alpine, except that in Alpine version 2, this EL always refers to the element on which the Alpine.js attribute declaration happens. So this init method happens on here, on this div, which happens to be the same one as xdata. So, but because xinit is on this div, this $EL is basically this div, right? Oh, that doesn't work here for some reason, I don't know. So anyway, let's we can use $EL here. By the way, in Alpine version 3, this EL always refers to the root component of the Alpine.js of the Alpine.js component. Okay, so and then we're passing some stuff in. So I guess that's the constructor function. Here we are assigning a resize method, and here on the widget element, an event observer for the event click.uk.slideshow is added. Actually, no, it's not added to the element. It's added to all children elements matching this selector. So if anything that has a data UK slideshow item that's a child of this element will have a observer for this event, and this is the callback function. So I guess, so this here is jQuery syntax. So we want to refactor this. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll first show you how to write this exact same code using vanilla JavaScript. And otherwise, and then I'll refactor it again and show you a more Alpine.js style way of doing it. All right, so so first of all, we want all children matching this selector. So to get all children, we can simply use this .el.querySelector with the same selector. So that's now all our slideshow items. So now we want to iterate over them, and for this I like to turn this into an array and use map. Because query selector, actually we need to use query selector all. So query selector just returns the first item, query selector all returns a node list with all the items, and now we have an array from it. And the reason I want an array is because now we have the .map method here. The node list doesn't have that. So let's use E simply because that's what's being used up here too. So now we want to add a observer to it, and this is the callback function. Oh, you know what? I'll just call this item because it's not quite the same yet. So item add event listener. This here is my event. And this here, now we have the actual callback function that is corresponds to this one here. And now we do this. So this here is the exact equivalent from this, only using native JavaScript. It's not much more complicated, as you can see. Just this one loop here that's kind of hidden away inside of the jQuery widget code. Okay, but this is not the Alpine.js way. So I want to show you a different way to do this. What I want to do is I want to take this event name, so I'll copy it into my copy-paste buffer, and I'll also copy this here. You'll see why in a moment, and this here. And now I'll look for all items in this template that that would match this selector. All right. We need to add an event observer annotation to this DOM element. The way we would do this in Alpine.js usually is by adding a @ character and then the event name. Here's the event name, an equal sign, and then the code that should happen. So this could be a callback method on the component. Or in this case, what I'll do is, if this is true, then it should evaluate the next bit of code, this bit here, right? And then it will run this code. There are two problems with this at the moment. First of all, this event name here has dots in it, and that's pretty unusual. To be honest, I've never encountered that before. So in Alpine.js version 2, there's a alternative syntax, which actually is presented as a default syntax here, which is xon. And what I wanted to show you is that for many events, we can add modifiers. For example, here the event is key down and it has the modifier escape, or click away. And they can also be combined, so there are multiple modifiers, something like input debounce 750 milliseconds, right? So Alpine treats dots in event's name as modifiers. So I'm afraid it would try to use the modifiers UK and slideshow, which don't actually exist, for the regular click modifier. So in this case, we have to actually use a different syntax, which is xon : and now we can wrap the event name in square brackets, and that means this will be the actual event name. It won't treat these as modifiers. The second problem with this here is that the slideshow property here would have to be a property of our component. At the moment here, slideshow is a variable, or constant actually, that's only known in the scope of init. So instead, let's go ahead and add it as a property to our component. And we'll have to replace that with something proper later on anyhow, right? So all we know is we need to have this options property in here so we don't get any undefined property of null or whatever errors. So let's just say this is our dummy slideshow, all right. And now here we'll just use this, and this here would be this. But in fact, we can actually remove this here now because we already moved that code into the Alpine annotations down here, right? So now we have slideshow as a property of our component that we're returning here. And here we have the code to run the action when this event is triggered. And we also need to add this same event observer. We had two more matches, right? So right here and there. All right. So here and here. Okay. So what's next? So slideshow this, actually because slideshow is no longer used in this way, I'll just leave it as a reference for future. Let's go ahead and also comment out this here because we were not using it because jQuery, right? And also this here. And next part. So slideshow paused if mouse cursor on slide navigation or dot navigation. All right. This element on, so again some event observer is being declared. Oh, this time actually 2 event observers are declared for mouse enter and mouse leave. And on all children that match, I believe, all children that match the either this class selector or this class selector. Actually, I'm not sure of the syntax. So if this is an object, can we pass child selectors as second argument? Let's check. jQuery on events selector to filter descendants. Yep, that's right. All right, so cool. So once again, we could do the same thing we did before and just add both, this here and this here inline. But well, let's take the other route this time and add a callback function to our component and call that instead, using the annotations then. So I want to add 2 functions here, 2 methods to our component. I'll add the comment. Okay, the first one, how about we call it pause on enter? Yeah, good enough. And inside we do this here. This, no, this. I feel very German with the typo. Okay, and then we also have this callback here. How about we call this resume on leave? Sounds good enough. Okay, so now we have to find all occurrences of .nav and .uk side nav and add the annotations for mouse enter and mouse leave. Side nav, okay, but that's not a match. So these 2 are matches. Okay, so add mouse enter, pause on enter, add mouse leave, resume on leave. Resume on leave, that's better. All right, so we have that here and here. So those are our UK slide nav matches. And how about the other selector, which was this one? Right here. Okay. Nope. This is what I wanted. All right. Good. So now we refactored this little bit. All of this can go away. Okay. One little bit is left of this constructor. This options banner schedule. So this is not part of the default object, so it must always be passed in as an argument. Okay. So if there's more than 0, if not this time validator, so banner schedule is in arrays, it takes the first one and passes it in as an array. So this is kind of like an array slice, I guess. Okay. So if it's not true, it calls this delayed update, passing in only the first one. And then if time validator, so this time if it's true, this time the whole banner schedule is passed in, it calls send request. Okay, let's have a look at this time validator. Compare current time with schedule, param schedule. Okay, so annotations like this, they don't add any values, so they're just noise. I really like to remove them. So what happens here? Would be nice if it would tell us what schedule is instead. Here it uses moment.js. So moment.js, no argument means the current time. In UTC, formatted with year, month, day, hour, minute, is valid false, schedule for each. So yeah, this was an array element. Let's call it item. When I read element inside of a phtml file, I usually assume it's probably a DOM element, and here it clearly isn't. It's an item in a schedule, so maybe that's a better name. So each item, if the current date, so this string is equals to this item. Okay, so it compares the time of the schedule to the current date, and it ignores any values for seconds or below, so only up to the minute. And if one of the items is same minute on the same date, is valid as true, otherwise it's false. Okay, so we don't have moment. Oh, and actually, while we're at it, let me make this a proper method annotation here. Not annotation, method syntax. Because, okay, we don't have moment, and I want to use not string comparison, but we can do better than that. So how about const current date minute is date.now, I believe. Let me check if that's true. Yeah, so these are the milliseconds, very good. Now we have seconds, and now we have minutes. Yeah, every minute it'll increment by 1. And let's get rid of this here. And now here we'll compare this with new date, and yeah, get time returns the timestamp, I believe. I just remember now, yeah, now is not defined on date instances, but I think get will return the Unix timestamp. Yeah, that's good. Okay, get time. So if that's the same to the current date up there, current date minute is valid as true. Okay, so that's our new time validator function without any dependency on moment.js. Let's move back. Delayed update. Okay, here the first banner schedule entry is passed in. Calculate time before send AJAX request. All right. Okay, so here it happens, the same thing happens. It uses moment to get the current timestamp, an interval, and this, my little pet hatred again. Okay, so here we have moment initialized from the future time, diff to moment current date, so the number of milliseconds, and if the milliseconds are in the future, it sets a timeout to call this send request. Okay, so again, we can do a bit better. What we'll do is we'll say same thing as before. The interval, the interval will be future time get time divided by 60. And now we don't even have to call value of anymore. So if the interval is larger than 0, we call set timeout, and we will make this a one-line arrow function call with the interval, like this. All right. So we can get rid of this and of this. We'll just have to add a const modifier there. Ooh, I forgot. So this here is the future time. We still have to subtract current minute. All right, so just to be safe, it should be fine, but I want to add a parenthesis there too, just for readability. All right, very good. So we calculate the interval, and if it's in the future, reschedule send request accordingly. Good, so that's delayed update. Where was this being called? Right here. Time validator we already took care of. So let's have a look at send request. Send request for clean banner cache. Oh, look at this. It isn't even, there is no context switch here, so good start. This is an AJAX post request containing some JSON data in the body to this URL here. All right, so we'll do the same thing using fetch to this URL. By default, it would be a GET request, but we want a POST request. So we would need to add some options here. Method POST. And we want to send some JSON body content. So that would be headers. And you know what? I'll use the docs, the Hyvä docs. There are many examples. I can copy and paste an example for this out of the docs here using fetch. So a simple AJAX post request. This is what I was looking for. Content type application JSON. So that's what we will have to specify here. And now we can specify the body. Body, which is JSON stringify of this value right here. And let's make this a bit, oh, you know what? We can make that even nicer here. All right, so this here is the native vanilla JavaScript version of this. So bye-bye jQuery. Very nice. Send request for clean banner cache. That's good. Time validator. How about this comment isn't quite accurate. We don't just calculate and compare the current time with schedule. Instead, we say schedule. Oh no, actually, that's okay. Here, that was it. Calculate time. No, what we do here is schedule. All right. Okay, so where are we at? So we fixed these methods call and they should be fine now. So we completed the initialization method. Good. Let's move on. This is fine, this is fine. Resize banner. Recalculate the width and height of the banner. Very good. So this time the slideshow is passed as an argument. So where is this called actually? Let's see. So this has been commented out. Let's refactor it nevertheless, and maybe we can reuse it later on. So first of all, I don't want this here. And this element closest, that's a super easy fix. What we can do here is we can just use closest on the element, the native closest, and it will return the first match, the closest parent that matches either this or this ID or class. Cool. So is main content redeclared? It isn't. Very good. So let's say const. But width is being redeclared. So let's say let here. What about height? Height is redeclared too. All right. Good. So what have we got here? Slideshow options height, recalculate the width if slideshow slides length. All right, so it finds all children of this slide, so this must be an element. So instead of jQuery find, we'll use this and then query selector all. And probably all, yeah. Oh no, wait, it's reading this. So let's just use query selector. So the first one, prop natural width, we can just call natural width, not call, access natural width. All right, so that's again the native JavaScript version of the previous code. Okay, so if main content length closest, the method from the native browser API will return null if there's no match. So here we shouldn't compare length, we should just check if main content is truthy. So if this was a match, we want to go into here. So if the width of the main content. So to get the width of an element, we use get bounding client rect width. Okay, oops. This here should go away. All right. All right. So if the main content is smaller than the width of this image, the width is set to the smaller main content width. Okay, and here we are setting the element style width property. Style width equals width, but we have to add a unit because it's like regular CSS. All right, good. So resize banner, actually, you know what? So this was a callback function here based on this init method. So I would like to maybe capture this element in here as a secondary argument. Wow, the slideshow is being passed in as an argument. Well, okay. The reason... Okay, so my problem was, if this is loaded later, maybe in a different object context, this element might not be the same element because this changes sometimes. So how about we change this to this is the component root. Okay. What's next? So wait a moment. So here, so if we have some main content, this happens. If this doesn't match, but page wrapper is matched, but this is wait a moment. So this here is the same selector, yeah, as up here. So this is actually, if there, that's weird. This is dead code, I think, because if this here matches, if this doesn't match, this would have matched. So this here, if this would match, this would also match. You know what? I'll refactor it nevertheless, but I still think it's dead code. So how about this? Document query selector, page wrapper, no length, just query selector. So if we have this, then we'll use this query selector get bound inclined rect width. So this looks pretty ugly and long. How about we take this here, container box, this, and then we can say this here. A little bit nicer maybe. I wonder what this is. Some magic number. Anyway, that's okay. So if the container width is smaller than the width, so that's basically the same logic that happens here actually. The width is set here. So yeah, this is dead code. I'm still kind of hesitant to remove it right now. You know what? Let's remove it. I'm sure it's dead code. All right. So now what have we got here? Recalculate height. So slideshow option height is auto, and slide if there are some slides, we want to set the height property to empty. Style height equals empty. Height is slide thorough height get bound inclined rect height. All right, so now the container height is set to this height. Anyway, you get the idea. Setting these refactoring jQuery to native JavaScript is pretty much cookie cutter code writing, right? It's a lot of the same kind of operations. Okay, this gets replaced by this, and so on. It's not really hard once you're familiar with the native browser JavaScript API. For modern browsers, it's really simple to get rid of jQuery in almost all cases. So far, at least for me, it has been. Okay, so now here, this is a little bit more interesting. So we have multiple slides, or 0 or more, I guess. So here we want to ensure that the height and the position property are set for each one. So let's do this slides.map. And for each one we say slide style. Okay, resize banner. Yeah, how much more have we got? So we have loading slides. This one's already done. Send request. Oh, this one's done, except that we forgot to change the method declaration type. Delayed update. That's already done, except we also forgot to change the method declaration type. And we have random sort. Okay, so 2 more functions, and they're pretty small. Almost done. Load slides. Receive the slideshow, var slide image. Let's start by doing let here. Oops, let. So for each slide, unless the first one, so the first one has the index 0. This means for all following slides, they are lazy loaded. Okay, so in this case, slide image actually is only declared once in this scope here, in this block scope. So we can use const here and remove this let statement out there. So let's use a arrow function. Okay, so for the slides element find, we'll use slide element query selector. So here we're getting an image with a class, so this is an image. So if image and, okay, so here we have a data source attribute. To check if it exists or not in native vanilla JavaScript, we check the data set property of an element. So data set. So if this is set here, then we want to add an event observer. Slide image event listener. So this would be the load event. And in the callback, we just add the class is loaded. All right, so we'll use slide image class list add is loaded. Okay, so and now it sets the source property of slide image. So slide image source equals, and that would be the data set value. And finally, the data source attribute is removed by setting it to null. So here we can use slide image remove attribute data source. All right, jQuery gone. Same code. Time validator is done. Send request is done. Delayed update is done. Random sort. So random sort is called, or not called, that is, up here. So this was commented out originally. I'd still like to refactor it. By the way, I try to avoid this kind of underscore method names or variable names or things like that in both PHP and JavaScript. It's kind of smelly. I'll leave it for now though to indicate, hey, this is something that's not actually being called and it's the same in the parent class, so let's keep it. So what happens here? Actually, this could be a const immediately. All right. So here we have aliasing two selectors, and on the element, so this is called from the init method, so we could say this.$el query selector. And wait a moment, is this only a single match or are there multiple matches? UK slideshow, let's check. How many will there be? This is not a match, this has a -item suffix. Okay, so it's one match. Good. Good, so we'll use query selector and we're setting the inner HTML here. Inner HTML equals. All right, so what's happening here? Here it finds all the slider items within the slider selector and sorts them by this random method. Let's take all of this here and oh, you know what? We'll use it inline, whatever. Just go step by step. So I'll remove the surrounding parentheses first of all. This element again is actually we already, yeah, actually that would be this one here. Oh wait, I added use $this there, that's bad. Okay, so this selector, query selector, you know what, might as well just use the same selector here. Okay, so the nested selector, and then this will give us a list of nodes. Query selector all is what we want here. So let's do array from. And now we want to sort this by math random, only that will use a inline arrow function that doesn't need any arguments. So now they're randomly sorted. So now let's go ahead and first of all, I really want this on this line, and then oh no, doesn't work well either. All right. So now I want to transform each element to a string and concatenate them. So let's map over each item. Item dot outer HTML join. So we create an array from all these inside of this slider list selector, sort them randomly, turn them into a string, and join them again. And that is the new inner HTML of the slider list selector. Yeah, I guess this is the exact thing we had previously, only using native code. Okay, we're through. Yay. So I expect a lot of errors to be thrown when I reload this, right? Let's try. We'll just have to work through each error and figure out what's wrong. What? That's kind of scary. Oops, nothing's wrong. Let's see. So here I've got the Alpine.js browser plugin installed, and here's our component. Here are all the options, and there are a few more values in it, which means our config merging worked, so that's okay. Slideshow object, wow, and all the functions we refactored. So it seems like, it looks like it kind of worked. I'm sure more errors will occur later when we start using these methods and calling them, right? At the moment, it's just running this function here, and the initialization function, and the initialization function doesn't really do anything because the banner schedule is empty. And well, I guess we could try these here. If we hover over some stuff here, I don't know. Oh no, that doesn't work either, because, no, actually, will that work? I don't know. Kind of weird. Resize banner, that won't be called because the call is commented out. Load slides, where's this called? I forgot. Oh yeah, load slides was also called from UIKit, so okay, so that's not used. Okay, so we refactored a bunch of code that at the moment isn't actually called. Yeah, banner schedule is empty, but at least it's valid syntax, right? So that's something. Okay, so what's next? In the next video, I guess we could refactor the CSS so it looks, this stuff here is fixed and it maybe doesn't use the less. And then we also need to replace the actual slider functionality. Maybe with Gladiator, maybe with something we can steal or use straight out of Hyvä. So, for now, I hope that was helpful. Just going over all the code, refactoring one by one. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. See you soon.